Hat, sunglasses, Pepsi, notes, sources, thick skin. Check. You already know. Let's go. Welcome to Golden Blued, everybody. This is a college football channel. So if you like college football, hit the like and subscribe button. It's that simple. Also, send gear to represent your team and be a part of my background forever. All you have to do is send it to P.O. Box 360, Liberty, South Carolina 29657. Now that the entire family has gotten over the flu, you kind of figured that more of these car videos was going to pop up because, well, I have to go back in line and wait for the kids to get out of school. It is what it is. It's a part of life. Some of these car videos turn out really, really good. Some of them, not so good. So I'll let you, the audience, judge and decide whether this is a good one or whether it's not a good one. And, you know, a lot of people ask me, Golden Blued, why are you obsessed with conference realignment? You know what? I can't really put my finger on it. But I do admit I'm obsessed with it. Maybe it's the fact that there's so many options, so many choices, so many possibilities, so many new beginnings that could happen. So I've put out a lot of scenarios. I've probably covered just about every scenario there is. And if I haven't, I will find that scenario and I will cover it. But today, I want to talk about something straight up. To me, this seems to be a no-brainer decision that should happen, but I'm not sure if it ever will. I don't know if these two conferences will ever come to their senses and actually do this. Now, we all know that the Big Ten and the SEC, they're going to be fine. And they're going to be just fine. In fact, a lot of people think that they're going to split off from the NCAA, create their own playoff invitational, have their own sets of rules and ways that they invite certain teams to the playoff invitational. And if you're not in the SEC or the Big Ten, then you need to make sure that your conference is as strong as possible. That way, some of your teams also gets the invite. I don't think that they're going to exclude other conferences, but you better have some good brands if you want to get the invite. You better have some good wins on that schedule. Maybe they will still schedule outside of their conferences. So if you're the ACC or the Pac-12 or the Big 12, you want to make sure that you have really good brands and that the SEC and the Big 10 doesn't pick off the rest of your really good brands. Otherwise, you're going to be left with nothing. So what is this no-brainer decision that I think should happen but might not happen because people are stupid. People make stupid decisions or they don't know how to make the right decision. Well, the no-brainer thing that I think should happen is the ACC and the Pac-12 need to merge. This is an absolute no-brainer. These two conferences are definitely colleagues. I would put them up there with the Big Ten as far as academics and how they value academics and their academic standards. I think the Pac-12 and the ACC are very, very similar whenever it comes to that. Now, there's a couple of teams in the ACC that might not be quite up to the standards of the Pac-12. That would be maybe a Louisville or a Miami, although I do think Miami does have good academics. So maybe it's just Louisville. I don't know. But I think they would put up with Louisville in order for this merger to happen and to save their skins. I know there's this power struggle, and maybe the two conference commissioners want to remain the conference commissioner if this were to merge. Why can't you stay the way you are as far as your title, but just have a merger? You manage side A, which is the ACC, and you manage side B, which is the Pac-12. And most of your schedule would include the teams that were in your original conference, the Pac-12 and the ACC, but then there would be a lot of crossover scheduling. So maybe like 3 or 4 games on the schedule would be part of the extended conference. So for Pac-12 teams, let's say 3 or 4 games on their schedule would include teams that were from the ACC. Same with the ACC. 3 or 4 games of your schedule would be games with teams that were in the former Pac-12. I think it makes a lot of sense. So if these two conferences merged, they would have 24 members. What have we been talking about? The possibility that the Big Ten and the SEC, their magical number is 24. They might be trying to get to 24. We don't know this for sure, but it makes a lot of sense. But in order for them to get to 24, they need to go around and pick off the major brands. That does mean that Washington and Oregon are at risk in the Pac-12, along with Stanford, maybe Washington State. In the Big 12, you're looking at Oklahoma State, West Virginia, probably Texas Tech as well, maybe a BYU or a TCU. And then the ACC, you're looking at a Clemson, a Florida State, a Miami, a Virginia Tech, a North Carolina, possibly NC State, Syracuse, maybe Virginia. So there's a lot of bigger brand and name recognition that would be at risk of being picked off of these conferences if they don't get something done. And right now, it's not looking good for the Pac-12. They just got USC and UCLA taken away from them. All the Big 12 members just signed a grant of rights, so the Pac-12 can't get anybody out of the Big 12 right now because they're locked in till 2031. And for the ACC, they're in a bad TV deal as well. So the Pac-12 and the ACC, they're in a similar boat as far as they could be in danger of getting picked apart. And for the ACC, I know, the grant of rights locks everybody in. But if those 8 teams exist as far as voting to dissolve the grant of rights, then the ACC is in danger of getting picked apart as well. And if there's at least 8 teams that are promised spots in better conferences, then I promise you, those 8 teams do exist. And do not trust Notre Dame. If I were you, ACC, I would not trust Notre Dame to not vote to dissolve the ACC, because they could very well be one of the 8 members, because like an idiot, you gave them a vote, so they could be one of the 8 members to vote to dissolve you because y'all gave them a vote. And they're not even a full-time football member. Why y'all did that, I have no idea. The ACC and the Pac-12, they need to merge. That's the bottom line. And you'd be looking at a 24-team conference. That's exactly the number you want, and you'd be keeping some big brands. So here's what it would look like. Boston College, Clemson, Duke, Florida State, Georgia Tech, Louisville, Miami, NC State, North Carolina, Pitt, Syracuse, Virginia, Virginia Tech, Wake Forest, Arizona, Arizona State, Cal, Colorado, Oregon, Oregon State, Stanford, Utah, Washington, Washington State. That's a great looking conference. I love that conference. That's a conference that goes from the East Coast to the West Coast, and the only other conference that's doing that right now is the Big Ten, because they went out and got USC and UCLA. And I do think that with the Pac-12 merging with the ACC, that would soften the blow of losing UCLA and USC tremendously. I mean, you would be gaining brands like Clemson, Florida State, Miami, North Carolina, Syracuse, Virginia Tech. Those are great brands. So maybe the combination of those brands would make up 100%, not just a little bit, but 100% from losing USC and UCLA. This is a no-brainer for the Pac-12. It's the same thing for the ACC. If you want to keep the members happy and you want to keep 8 teams from voting to dissolve and poof goes the ACC, then do this. Because I guarantee you that if the ACC and the Pac-12 merged, they would get a tremendous TV deal. And I think this TV deal would at least rival the Big Ten and the SEC. There are too many great brands in this combination merger for the TV deal to at least not approach what the Big Ten and the SEC are getting. You get some big time money if this merger were to happen. And think of some of these potential matchups. And if I leave the name of your team out, please don't get mad. It just means you're not one of the biggest brands right now. So think of these matchups. Clemson and Oregon. Wow, that is a great matchup. And I would do a home and home. Don't do this neutral site garbage. You want home field atmosphere, home field advantage. And it doesn't have to be an every year thing. Maybe Clemson and Oregon does it for 2 years, and then Clemson, Washington, Clemson, Utah, and so on and so forth. So Clemson, Oregon, great matchup. 2 massive brands. Florida State, Washington. That's an interesting matchup. You have 2 extremes, the state of Florida and the state of Washington, and 2 of the best brands out of those 2 states matching up. I love it. Oregon, Miami. That's part of the rotation that I was talking about earlier. That's a great matchup. Utah, Clemson. That would be great in the rotation. Oregon, North Carolina. 2 similar brands. They are national, but not quite as big as everybody thinks, but still, that would draw a lot of eyeballs. Florida State, Utah. Washington, Clemson. Oregon, Florida State. Virginia Tech and Oregon. Don't overlook that matchup. I think that would be intriguing. And yes, I know right now Virginia Tech's down, but Virginia Tech has a great brand, and I think this would draw some eyeballs. Utah, Virginia Tech, Miami, Utah, Washington, Virginia Tech, Louisville, and Oregon. I think those 2 brands are similar. Louisville, Washington, Louisville, Utah, Miami, and Washington. I even like NC State and Oregon. And an outside matchup that could be intriguing just because of the sheer fan base size, not because they necessarily have the best brand, but Syracuse and Washington State. Washington State now has one of the biggest fan bases in the Pac-12, and Syracuse does have the biggest fan base if you're not counting Notre Dame. Now, on top of this, if this merger were to happen, where would Notre Dame fit into this? Could they actually persuade Notre Dame to join as a full-time football member? This could be the key for the ACC to bring in Notre Dame as a full-time football member. Yes, USC left for the Big Ten, but that rivalry is not going anywhere. Notre Dame does not have to join the Big Ten for that rivalry to continue. That's going to continue until the end of time. So that's a possible perk to think about as far as merging the Pac-12 and the ACC. I think the possible matchups are off the charts, and I think it would keep the bigger brands from being picked off by the Big Ten and the SEC. Because make no mistake about it, the teams that are in the ACC and the teams that are in the Pac-12, they love the conference that they're in. They just don't like the money that they're getting. So if a merger happens and they get a great TV deal, I think all the brands stay as is, and you're looking at a conference that could rival the Big Ten and the SEC, not only in money and revenue, but also in competition. So y'all let me know in the comments section, what do you think about a potential merger between the Pac-12 and the ACC? Number one, do you think it would ever actually happen? And number two, if they did, do you think that they would get a TV deal that could at least approach what the SEC and the Big Ten has? That's all I got for this show. Like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you on my next show.